fellow humans, and welcome to the latest episode in my Trip to India series. And today we will be visiting some very cool historical buildings that are sort of half-day trip distance from Dharamshala, and so I'm really excited to bring you along on this journey. First up are the Masroor Rockcut temples, and they're likely an early 8th century complex of Hindu temples that were monolithic in structure. Now, there was shockingly little that I could find online about the history of these temples, as well as at the actual location itself. Usually they'll have like snippets of history placed up everywhere, but this didn't really seem to have that. So, which leads me to believe that maybe there's not much research into this, or maybe it's just really difficult to date this temple or what its origins were based on the damage that it has sustained over several hundred years. From the research that I could do, it feels like these temples, or specifically this temple now that it's one mass, has actually been dated to the early 8th century, mostly because of the architectural style that it was built in, and just generally because other temples of this sort of period display similar qualities. As far as I can tell, I don't know if there's been any dating of the stone or anything, and there's also this huge issue where no sort of literature mentions these temples, so it's kind of like they sprung out of nowhere just like 100 years ago. And despite most of the damage there, it's still a very, very beautiful thing to look at, because the architecture is just beautiful, and you know that this temple is at least 1,000 years old, and so it's just so amazing to be able to touch it. And this was like the oldest thing that I've ever touched in my entire life, and I was super excited about that. And now most of the damage that you can see is a result of the 1905 Kangra earthquake, so only about 100 years ago, where a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck the Kangra region on the 4th of April 1905. According to Wikipedia, it was early morning, but according to this one guy that was at the next building that we visit, it was at 6:19 a.m. And it was devastating, both for the historical buildings in the area, which many of them were damaged, but even more so devastating for the people who lost their homes, and about 20,000 lives were lost. And you can even see in these videos that there was these whole sections that fell apart and that were actually filled in by, I'm not sure who, but like these newer bricks. They were sections that were filled in after the damage of the earthquake, so that the structure can still remain standing, but also, because it's got all these missing parts, they had to fill them in. And though it's an unlikely origin to this temple, the general legend around people of the area is that this was actually built by the Pandava 5,000 years ago, after the Mahabharata war took place. The next day, we were off to another similarly beautiful site, and this was the Kangra fort, and we made our way out of Dharamshala down to Kangra to see this fort. Now, this is the oldest fort in the Kangra/Himalaya region, and also most likely the oldest fort that's still standing in India today. So it's about 3,500 years old and was first built by Maharaja Susharma Chand, so King Susharma Chand. This fort was originally the central fort, which was surrounded by 200 to 300 smaller forts, so it was near impenetrable, and it was surrounded by a deep ravine and a river. And this gate that I'm walking through now actually used to have a huge metal gate inside it, so that just added to its defenses. Originally built and sustained by the Kadoj family, this is their family crest gate sort of thing, which features Lord Ganesh, the god of wisdom, Ma Durga, who is the symbol of female empowerment, protection, and destruction, and Hanuman, who is the symbol for strength, and also a deer, a female deer specifically, a doe, which was the Kadoj family animal. Now, this next gate is the Jahangiri Gate, which is named after Jahangir, who was a Mughal emperor who ruled over India. And it took him 14 months. The fight to capture this fort took him 14 months to be able to get inside and claim his rule over the fort, which just speaks to the volumes of how difficult it really was to penetrate this fort.
So, yesterday I touched the oldest thing that I've ever touched in my life, right? Well, today I am now touching the oldest thing that I've ever touched in my life again. These stones have been here for 3,500 years.
When Jahangir finally claimed victory over the fort, he let the reigning king, who he had just recently defeated, King Harichand, go, but when Harichand tried to retake the fort, he captured him, strung him on the side of the fort walls, and skinned him alive. When King Harichand's ancestor, King Gumanchand, retook over the fort for his family 100 years later, whichever Mughal soldier that he captured, he took them and skinned them alive. And this site was originally where the palace for the nobles or the royal family, whoever lived here, was. And when the Mughals claimed victory over the fort, all of the noble women of the house jumped into a well, which was likely this one here or the other one on that side. I'm not entirely sure which one, but it's pretty obvious why they did this, because being a woman on the losing side of the war is not a great place to be. And this cliffside was not always this sheer. It was actually man-made to be this smooth by soldiers who literally hung down the side of this mountain with hammers and other tools to smooth it out so that it was impossible for the enemy to climb up this side and attack that way. And because this fort is so old and it's had so many different rulers over the years, all of these things and all of the details inside are dated back to different periods, but the statues of Yamuna and Ganga, which are actually two rivers in India, are 2,000 years old. And this was a little basin used to wash one's feet before entering the temple, because it's customary to do so, because it's disrespectful to bring your dirty feet inside the temple and dirty it. And this is the area which housed 21 treasure wells, which stored excess treasure of the royal family at the time. Most of the time this was the Kadorch family, or excess offerings which haven't been used. There was 350 temples that the Kadorch kings looked after, and when the people donated more, the extra offerings which weren't being used to give back to the people or pay for the army were actually stored here for safekeeping. And this was basically a rainwater collection tank, and you can see on all four sides there's these holes leading into the tank so that water could be more sufficiently directed into the tank. And it did sustain most of its damage from the 1905 Kangra earthquake, and it's insane to think that for about 3,400 years, this stood up so well, and there was just minimum damage to it from other wars and stuff. Like, it was that good of a fort. But during the 1905 earthquake, at that time, the British actually had occupation of this fort. So the one good thing that they did by being here was the fact that they actually preserved as much as they could after the earthquake, and they made sure that the damage wasn't too much that it would continue falling over for a bunch of other years, because at that point there was nobody else there to take care of the damage, right? Because they were in control of India. So at the very, very, very least, they helped preserve this monument. And don't take this as me singing praises of the British, because I'm definitely not, and though they did manage to preserve this fort in as good as a condition as they could, I don't give them much credit for it, because they did bomb the outside palace where the royal family would have lived, and now we no longer have the opportunity to see that site because they bombed it. But unfortunately, that brings this episode and this trip to an end, so you will no longer be getting any more McLeod Ganj content, which is kind of sad, but I hope you're having a good day nonetheless. I hope you continue to have a good day, and I shall see you next time.